Each morning in Callum feels like the world repeats itself, as if the sun and I have an old agreement. The rooster calls before I'm even awake, the sky softens into pink, and I tie my old yellow scarf the way my mother taught me. I give myself a small sleepy ha-ha, trying to pretend the day is light, but the weight of what I must do settles on me long before I lift the heavy jerry can. 12 miles. 6 to the river, 6 back home. I know the road so well it almost feels alive. I know the stones that stab my heels, the thorns that tug at my skirt, the sharp dip where the earth tries to twist my ankle if I'm not careful. Some mornings the wind carries children's voices calling, "Sister Water," and I wave even when my arms already feel tired. Some elders watch me pass and whisper a soft awe, thinking I can't hear the sympathy in their voices. But most days it's just me and the long dry path stretching ahead like a promise I never asked to make. I keep walking because I must. I hum the songs my mother used to sing when her voice was still strong and the water hadn't yet made her sick. When I finally reach the riverbank, the water is always muddy, always heavy with the smell of earth. I scoop it into my container, watching the sunlight dance on its surface, blinking back the sting in my eyes. Not because it's beautiful, but because I know I'll walk this same road tomorrow, and the next day, and maybe forever. Life in Callum feels like it has been shaped by distance and dry ground. Every day begins long before the sun rises. While others still sleep, I step outside with heavy eyes and an even heavier heart. I walk to the river before the birds finish their morning songs. When most people are sitting down to eat, I am only just returning, my feet dusty, my clothes sticking to my skin, my shoulders burning. I eat when the village is quiet, when everyone else is resting, and then I must walk again in the afternoon to collect water for cooking. My hands always smell like river mud, no matter how much I wash them. My back aches like I am an old woman, even though I am only 23. Some mornings I feel older than the hills around us. People in the village try to act normal around me, but pity slips out of their eyes before they can hide it. They smile too gently, speak too softly. Sometimes I joke to stop myself from breaking apart. I say things like, "At least my legs will be stronger than any man in Callum," and I laugh even though the sound shakes in my throat. On other days, when the world feels too heavy, I sit behind my house where no one can see me. I let my tears fall into the dry soil, and the ground drinks them quickly, as if it knows the feeling of thirst even better than I do. But even with my tired body and tired heart, I still help wherever I can. When Mama Sefu wakes up with swollen joints and cannot take a single step, I carry an extra container for her. When children's bottles crack or break, I let them fill mine first before I take a turn. When travelers wander through our paths confused and sunburnt, I stop what I'm doing to show them the safest way to walk. Sometimes they thank me, sometimes they don't, but it feels wrong to ignore someone who needs help because I know too well what helplessness feels like. One hot afternoon, while the air was so dry it felt like it could scratch my throat, I met the stranger who would later change everything. At that moment, he was just a tired man standing at the crossroads with cracked sandals and dust on his face. He looked so lost that, for a moment, I wondered if he had walked in circles for hours. When he asked me where the river was, his voice shook like he was swallowing sand. I could hear the thirst inside each word. I held out my container and told him he could drink. He hesitated, surprised that someone would offer him water so freely, then took a careful sip, then another, and then sighed like his whole chest had been released from pain. He thanked me with a small, embarrassed smile, and I remember thinking he did not look like someone used to asking for help. I did not know his name then. I did not know his story or his purpose. To me, he was only a stranger at the crossroads, a man who needed water, a man whose eyes held both gratitude and confusion. I had no idea that this simple moment, on a dusty afternoon, would become the beginning of a path that would change my entire life. I met him on a day that felt hotter than fire, at the dusty place where the road divides between the Kali Hills and the river. He was leaning against a tree like the heat had taken all the strength out of him. His clothes were dusty, his lips dry, and he was breathing as if every breath hurt. When he looked up at me, his eyes carried a kind of desperation I knew too well. He asked if the river was still far, and the way he spoke told me he wasn't from here. His city accent sounded soft and clean, not shaped by sun and struggle the way ours is. I gave a small laugh because he had no idea how long the walk truly was. I told him gently that the river was far, but he could share my water if he needed it. He hesitated, almost shy, like accepting help was something he wasn't used to. Then he drank slowly, with a kind of quiet thankfulness that made me look at him twice. When he handed the container back, he told me his name was Kato. He said he was visiting the region for development research. The word research surprised me so much it slipped out of my mouth as a soft laugh. I wasn't laughing at him, only at the idea. What research did anyone need? Water is far. Water is dirty. Children fall sick. That has always been our truth, but instead of getting offended, he laughed too. His laugh was warm and easy, the kind that makes you relax without even knowing why. As we walked toward the river, I showed him the places where the stones hide like traps, ready to twist your ankle if you step wrong. I pointed out the tall grass where snakes like to sleep in the heat. He didn't pretend to know everything like many visitors do. He listened closely, asking questions no one in my whole life had ever thought to ask me. Questions about the path, about how long I had walked it, about my mother, about our village. It felt strange to be noticed so fully. When we reached the river, he watched me gather the muddy water into my container. His face changed, tightening with something heavy. Maybe anger, maybe sadness, maybe disbelief that people lived like this. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just watched the brown water fill the container as if it was breaking something inside him. When it was finally time to leave, he stepped closer and said quietly, "You shouldn't have to do this." I shrugged and gave a small laugh because what else could I say? Should or shouldn't, it was still my life. It was still the path I walked every single day. As I turned to leave, I could feel his eyes following me. He stood there frowning slightly, like he was trying to remember every step I would take on the long road back home. He looked at me the way someone looks at a story they don't want to forget. I didn't know then that this moment at the crossroads was the beginning of everything that would come after. Kato came back the very next afternoon, and then the next, and soon it felt strange to walk the path without hearing his footsteps behind me. People in Callum started whispering about the city man who followed me around like a shadow, trying his best to match my pace. He always failed in the funniest way. While I walked steadily, he puffed and panted like he had been running for miles. Children loved teasing him. They would point and laugh, and he would drop to his knees dramatically, pretending he was about to faint. The whole village would burst into giggles, and even I couldn't hide my smile. He insisted on helping me carry my jerry can, but at first he was terrible at it. He spilled water everywhere, sometimes so much that I had to go back for more. I would laugh so hard that my stomach hurt, even though my legs shook from exhaustion. But day by day he learned, and every day he asked questions no one else asked. He asked about my mother, how long she had been sick, what songs she used to sing. He asked about my dreams, the ones I had buried under miles of walking. He asked what I wished for if life ever became kinder. No one ever asked me those things before. At night, after he walked home, I would sit under the stars and think about how he listened without ever judging me. He never called me poor or unlucky. He looked at me like I mattered. One afternoon at the riverbank, while I filled my container, he suddenly crouched down and began digging at the ground with a stick. His face was tight with frustration. I watched him for a moment before asking what he was doing. Without looking up, he said in a voice that trembled, "There should be a well here. You deserve a well. Everyone deserves water that doesn't make them sick." His words hit me so sharply that I froze. I wasn't used to someone being angry for my sake. A small awe escaped me before I could swallow it back. I told him gently that wells needed money and engineers and time, things that were far too big for two people with tired hands. I expected him to agree to sigh to let it go. Instead, he whispered, almost to himself, maybe not bigger than us. Maybe just not tried yet. I shook my head and laughed, thinking it was one of his hopeful city ideas that would fade by the next morning. But he didn't laugh with me this time. He just stared at the ground as if he could already see water waiting beneath it, as if he believed something impossible could still be possible. 3 months after meeting Kato, the sky forgot how to rain. The drought came like a quiet thief, stealing the river little by little until it looked like a thin brown ribbon stretched across cracked earth. Each trip felt heavier than the one before. The air burned my lungs. The sun glared down like it wanted to punish the whole world. One afternoon, as I walked back home with my jerrycan full, the heat wrapped around me so tightly I could barely breathe. My legs trembled with every step, but I kept telling myself I could push through. I even gave a small weak ha-ha, hoping the sound would convince my body to stay strong. But the laugh tasted like dust, and before I knew it, the world blurred. My knees bent in a way they shouldn't, and I collapsed into the dirt. When I opened my eyes, everything was noise and worry. I heard my name again and again, said by a voice full of fear. It was Kato. His hands were warm on my cheeks, holding my face like he was afraid I would disappear if he let go. His forehead was pressed against mine, shaking slightly. My jerrycan lay on its side, muddy water soaking into the ground. People from the village stood around us. Someone fanned me with a leaf. Someone else pressed herbs against my palms. My head pounded like drums. Kato didn't let anyone else lift me. He picked me up himself, even though his arms were shaking, and carried me all the way home. His shirt was wet with sweat and spilled river water. He stayed beside me, refusing to move even when others told him to rest. He sat with his head in his hands, angry at the heat, angry at the river, angry at anything that made my life this hard. When I woke later that evening, his eyes were red and swollen, as if he had cried until there were no tears left. "You could have died," he whispered, his voice breaking. I wanted to make a joke, to lighten the moment and tell him I was too stubborn to die. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, tears slid down my face, soft and slow, because the truth was heavy, and because seeing him care so deeply shook something inside me. He reached out with a trembling hand and brushed away my tears with his thumb. In that quiet moment, something changed between us. It wasn't love, not the kind people write songs about. It was something deeper, something quieter. It felt like someone finally choosing to stand with me against the weight of the world. It felt like I was no longer carrying everything alone. It felt like the beginning of a promise neither of us had spoken yet, but both of us felt. One morning Kato didn't appear on the path. I waited a little, pretending I wasn't waiting, then walked on. The next day he still didn't come. Then a week passed. The villagers shrugged and said this is how city people are. They come with soft smiles and kind words, but they always leave when life becomes too real. I tried to laugh along, but something inside me cracked quietly, like dry earth splitting in the heat. My feet hurt more now, my shoulders felt heavier, and every step without him felt like the road had doubled in length. It surprised me how much his absence hurt. The miles had never broken me, but missing him almost did. At night I sat by my door, listening for footsteps I knew weren't coming. Each evening the silence grew louder. My chest tightened in a way that embarrassed me. My jokes lost their color. My laughter became thin, like it was trying to hide how lonely I felt. Months slipped by. The drought got worse. The river thinned until it barely moved. My mother's health dropped again, and fear followed me like a shadow. I began to believe Kato was only a passing moment, a kind stranger who cared for a while but couldn't stay. Maybe I had imagined the connection. Maybe I had expected too much. Maybe he had seen the weight of my life and decided it was too heavy for him. Then, on a burning afternoon when the air felt thick enough to choke, I heard a strange rumble from the road. A large truck rolled into Kalamb, kicking up dust clouds. People rushed from their homes, confused. Men jumped out carrying tools, long pipes, and heavy drilling machines. The whole village stared as if a miracle had walked straight into our doorway. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. And then the passenger door opened. A familiar figure stepped out, wiping sweat from his face. His clothes were dusty, his hair messy, his eyes tired but shining. It was Kato. For a second I couldn't breathe. He looked at me and his face lit up like he had been holding this moment inside him for months. He laughed, the sound breaking free in a breathless burst, full of relief and something deeper. Then his laugh softened into a wet sound, like he was holding back tears, like he had missed this place more than he dared admit. He took a step toward me, and in his eyes I saw everything at once, the pain of leaving, the struggle of trying, the hope that carried him back, and the joy of finally returning. It felt like the world, for the first time in a long time, was opening its hands instead of closing its fists. The drilling began with a roar that felt too big for our small village. The machines shook the ground so hard it felt like the earth was waking after a long sleep. Dust rose into the air in thick clouds, covering everything: our clothes, our hair, even our voices. Children ran around the workers, laughing, shouting, pretending they were helping. Elders stood in a circle nearby with their heads bowed, whispering prayers that trembled with hope and fear. I stayed close to Kato, feeling lightheaded, almost dizzy because none of this felt real. He spoke to me over the noise, telling me how he had spent months running from place to place, raising money, meeting engineers, begging organizations to listen. He said he showed everyone the videos he took of my long walk to the river, the cracked stones, the muddy water, my tired steps. He said he refused to give up. Then he turned to me and said softly, "You inspired all of this. You gave me a reason." My breath stopped. My hand flew to my mouth, and tears poured out faster than I could control. I hiccuped through my sobs, and he laughed gently, brushing a tear off my cheek with his thumb as if it was something precious. The drilling continued, hour after hour, day after day. The whole village gathered from dawn till dusk as if the earth were telling a story, and none of us wanted to miss a single word. People brought stools, mats, small pots of food. Children napped under trees, waiting for the moment that felt close but never certain. Every strike of the machine felt like a heartbeat. Then one evening, when the sky was deep orange and the sun looked tired from watching us hope, a sudden shout cut through the air. The workers jumped back. The machine sputtered, then stopped. For a second everything was silent. And then from the ground water burst upward in a shining spray. Clear, clean, bright like a jewel thrown into the sky. The entire village exploded into sound. People screamed, laughed, cried, shouted each other's names. Parents lifted their children. Elders fell to their knees. Women threw their hands in the air. It was joy so loud it felt like the earth itself was celebrating. I dropped to my knees too, my hands shaking, my heart racing so wildly I thought it might leap out of my chest. I laughed and cried at the same time, because I didn't know which feeling was stronger, relief or wonder. Kato knelt beside me, his arms wrapping around my shoulders as if he was afraid I might break apart from the emotion. I leaned into him, still shaking, still sobbing, still trying to understand that the dream I had never dared to dream was suddenly real. Then he whispered in my ear, "It's named after you, the Amara well." My breath left me in one sharp, trembling awe. It felt like my heart opened wide enough to let the whole world in. Years passed, and the Amara well became the heart of Kalumb. Its stones are smooth now, touched by so many thankful hands. Children run to it with bright smiles, filling their buckets in seconds instead of hours. Elders rest under the shade nearby, their faces calm because the long walks that once hurt their bones are only memories now. Women laugh as they wash their pots, their feet no longer swollen from endless miles under the burning sun. I often stand beside the small plaque with my name carved into it. Every time my fingers trace the letters, my chest grows tight, and I have to take a slow breath. Kato stands beside me too, not as the stranger I once met at the crossroads, but as my husband. He laughs as he watches the children splash water on each other, their joy filling the air like music. Sometimes he reaches for my hand, squeezing it gently, like he still cannot believe we reached this moment after all the years of struggle. Visitors come from far places to see the well. They ask about the girl who walked 12 miles every day. I tell the story softly, sometimes with a shaky voice, sometimes with a small laugh when I remember Kato spilling half the water the first time he tried to help me. They listen with wide eyes, as if they can feel each mile in their own bones. And then comes my favorite moment. I kneel by the well and dip my hands into the cold, clear water that changed everything. I lift it to my face, and the tears slide down my cheeks, mixing with the water. Around me stand people who once watched me with pity, but now they stand with gratitude, hope, and pride. The girl who once walked alone under the sun now stands beside a well born from love, surrounded by a community that now calls her their blessing.